The great hall of the Galactic Council shone with the light of 1,000 stars. Tall windows made of crystal-like material stretched from floor to ceiling, showing the endless black of space beyond. Inside, representatives from every major species in the galaxy sat in a perfect circle. They were here for what they thought would be just another routine meeting. Tyjon stood at the center of the hall. His species, the Valorians, were tall and silver-skinned, with eyes that gleamed like polished metal. He had served on the council for more than 200 years and had seen many things in his long life. Nothing surprised him anymore. He looked down at the documents before him with cold disinterest. Humans. A new species that had recently joined the council after decades of keeping to themselves. "This will be brief," Tyjon said, his voice smooth like oil. "The humans have requested a formal review of their military capabilities and colonial rights. They want to expand their settlements into the outer regions of the Kepler sector." He paused, a thin smile crossing his face. "Of course we will approve this. Humans are primitive by our standards. They possess no advanced weapons. Their ships are slow. Their culture is young and unstable. They pose no real threat to any established power in this galaxy. They can have the outer territories. We have no use for them anyway." Around the circle, other representatives nodded in agreement. A small, blue-skinned ethereal named Mina said nothing. Her old eyes moved from face to face, watching each reaction. She had been on the council even longer than Tyjon, and she did not share his confidence about anything. "The motion is approved," Tyjon announced. "Humans are granted exclusive rights to settle and develop the Kepler sector outer territories. Now let us move on to more important matters." But before anyone could speak, a warning alarm suddenly screamed through the halls of the council station. Red lights flashed on every wall. The representatives jumped to their feet, their peaceful expressions replaced by shock and fear. Alarms at the Galactic Council meant only one thing: a disaster had occurred somewhere in the known galaxy. The chief communications officer rushed into the hall. She was trembling. "We have received a distress signal from the outer colonies. The Krell Dominion is attacking. They have invaded 3 human colonial worlds in the Kepler sector." The silence that followed was heavy and thick. The Krell Dominion. Even saying their name sent fear into the hearts of most civilizations. They were warriors, bred for conquest and violence. For 3,000 years, they had attacked and conquered dozens of civilizations. Their military was the strongest in the galaxy. Their ships were nearly unstoppable, and worst of all, they showed mercy to no one. Tyjon's face showed interest for the first time. "Interesting. So the humans will finally learn what real power looks like. How long do the experts think they will last?" "Our models suggest the Krell will conquer the outer colonies within 1 week," the officer replied. "The human military forces are completely outmatched." Several council members leaned back in their chairs. This was sad, but not surprising. Weaker species were conquered all the time. It was simply how the galaxy worked. The strong survived, and the weak perished or became servants. Such was the law of nature. "We should discuss how to help the human refugees," Mina said quietly. "Many civilians will be displaced." Tyjon nodded slowly. "Yes, perhaps we can offer them sanctuary on some empty world. It is a small price to pay for their cooperation. They may still prove useful as laborers." Everyone seemed to accept this as the proper response. Yes, the humans would lose. Yes, many would suffer. But they were young, primitive, and weak. This was simply how things worked in the galaxy. Then, something unexpected happened. A communication signal came through directly from a human vessel. The voice that spoke was calm and clear. His name appeared on the screen: Commander Hai-Il, Human Fleet Command. Unlike Tyjon's smooth, oily tone, Hai-Il's voice was precise and controlled. Every word he spoke carried weight and meaning. This is Commander High-Il of the Human Expeditionary Fleet. We have detected an invasion of our colonial territories by the Krell Dominion. We acknowledge the threat. We are implementing our response protocol. You will receive a status update in 72 hours. The signal ended. The council members looked at each other in confusion. That was it. No requests for help, no panic, no desperate pleas for assistance. Just a simple statement of fact, followed by a promise of a report in 3 days. Taijin's expression did not change, but something in his eyes shifted. Interesting. The humans seem to understand their situation with clarity, that is, unexpected. Still, there is nothing they can do. The Krell have never lost a battle against a younger civilization. Mina said nothing, but her old hands gripped the edge of her seat. Something in High-Il's words had sparked a feeling in her. She did not know what it was, but it felt like recognition, like she had just heard someone speak a truth that few others could understand. The waiting began. The council established a watch. They monitored the signals coming from the Kepler sector. They waited for news of human defeat. They prepared statements expressing sympathy for the victims. They drafted documents about refugee relief and rehabilitation programs. Everything seemed to move forward as expected. But as the hours passed, the predicted signals of human distress never came. There were no final broadcasts from dying commanders. There were no pleas for mercy. There was only silence, deep and complete. The outer colonies went quiet. The human fleet disappeared from all tracking systems, and the Krell Dominion, usually loud in their victory with broadcasts of conquest and domination, also fell silent. Taijin called for an emergency report after only 20 hours had passed. Where are the updates? What is the status of the invasion? The communications officer was pale. Sir, we cannot establish contact with either side. The entire Kepler sector is dark. All signals have ceased. We have no information about what is happening. For the first time in 200 years, Taijin felt something stir in his chest that might have been doubt. He ordered probes sent immediately to investigate. They would have answers, whether they were good or bad. Around the circle, other representatives whispered to each other. This was strange. This was not how invasions normally worked. And beneath the strangeness, there was something else. Something like fear. Mina closed her old eyes and waited. She did not know what High-Il was doing in that darkness beyond their sight, but she sensed that the galaxy was about to change. She sensed that they had all made a terrible mistake in judging humans so quickly, and she sensed that the next 72 hours would define everything that came after. The waiting continued, and with each passing hour, the fear in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council grew deeper and darker. The tension in the Galactic Council Hall became almost solid. It was something you could touch and feel, hanging in the air like a terrible weight. Minutes turned into hours, and hours turned into a full day. Still, there was no word from the Kepler sector. The probes sent by the Council had not yet returned. The universe, it seemed, was holding its breath. Taijin paced back and forth across the great hall. His silver skin seemed to glow under the harsh lights. His usual calm had been replaced by something much sharper: impatience, irritation, perhaps even fear, though he would never admit such a thing to anyone. Around him, other council members remained seated, but their eyes followed his every movement. How long until the probes return? Taijin demanded for the 10th time. 37 minutes, the communications officer said quietly. She had been giving this same answer every few minutes. Her voice had become smaller and more uncertain with each repetition. Mina sat in complete silence. She had not moved for hours. Her ancient eyes were fixed on a single point in space, visible through the great crystal windows. The old ethereal was thinking. She was considering possibilities and outcomes. She was trying to understand what kind of species could respond to a Krell invasion with such calm certainty. What kind of people could simply vanish into darkness and promise only a report in 72 hours? The other council members tried to distract themselves. A Skorak representative began filing documents that had nothing to do with the current situation. A Valorian princess attempted to read a book, but she turned the same page over and over without understanding a single word. An ancient machine being named Cipher simply powered down into standby mode, unable to process the uncertainty. The waiting was unbearable. Then, finally, the probes began to return. They came into the station's docking bay one at a time, their sensors screaming data back to the main computer. Taejin rushed to the communication center. The other council members stood up, their previous attempts at distraction forgotten. The first images came through. On the main screen, the space around the human colonies appeared normal. The stars shone. The planets rotated in their orbits. But everything else was different. Very, very different. The Krell military installation that had been broadcasted across the galaxy as an instrument of conquest was gone. Completely gone. Not destroyed in the way an explosion destroys, leaving behind debris and wreckage. Gone. As if it had never existed at all. The station that had housed 10,000 Krell warriors, along with their weapons, their storage, and their command centers, had simply ceased to be. The scan moved across the sector. Every Krell military position showed the same result. Destroyed, dismantled, eliminated. But the human colonies, the human settlements were still there, still intact, still functioning. The civilian buildings remained untouched. The agricultural centers continued their work. The transport ships sat in their berths, unharmed. This cannot be real, Taejin whispered. More data came through. The communications officer's hands shook as she worked the controls. Sir, the Krell fleet. We are detecting remnants of their fleet throughout the sector, but they are not destroyed. They are disabled. All of them. Power systems offline. Weapon systems offline. Life support systems. Operating at minimal levels. It appears someone disabled them without destroying them. Mina stepped forward. Her old voice was steady and clear. Show me the pattern of destruction. Show me how they did this. The communications officer pulled up a tactical map. Lines appeared showing the sequence of attacks, the order of targets, the timing of strikes. It was perfectly logical, perfectly efficient. The Krell command centers had been hit first, severing their communication and leadership. The weapons factories came next, destroying their ability to rebuild. Then the shipyards. Then the military training centers. Then every single warship in the invasion force. It was not chaos. It was not random. It was not the frantic response of a desperate civilization fighting for survival. It was a surgery, precise, clean, calculated. The humans did this, someone said. It might have been Taejun. It might have been anyone. More data arrived. The initial estimates had been wrong. The human casualties were minimal, perhaps a few hundred. In contrast, the Krell military presence in the entire sector had been reduced to nothing. Not defeated. Reduced to nothing. There was a difference, and everyone in the hall understood it perfectly. Mina spoke again, her ancient voice carrying the weight of centuries of wisdom. They did not fight a war. They did not defend their territory. They did not trade ships and soldiers in a battle of attrition. They identified a problem and they solved it. The silence that followed was different from the silence that had come before. This silence was the silence of realization. This was the silence of an entire civilization, understanding that something fundamental had changed. Over the next hours, more information arrived. Detailed scans showed that not a single human military vessel had been destroyed. The human fleet was intact, not damaged, not wounded, intact and fully operational. 72 hours had passed, and Hai-Il had kept his promise. A status update came through the communication channels. "This is Commander Hai-Il. The threat to human colonial territories has been eliminated. All hostile military assets in the Kepler sector have been neutralized. Civilian populations are being provided with assistance and support. Human forces are returning to standard operational status. Thank you for your attention to this matter. We look forward to continued cooperation with the Galactic Council." The message was short. It was professional. It contained no boasting, no threats, no excitement. Just a simple statement of facts. The problem had existed. Now it did not. The outcome was acceptable. Normal operations would continue. Around the Great Hall, the council members stared at each other. Taijin's face had gone even paler than usual. His hands gripped the edge of the communication console so tightly that the metal bent slightly. His confidence, his certainty, his understanding of how the galaxy worked had all been shattered in a single moment. A young ethereal representative named Seo Jun found his voice first. "What did we just witness?" No one had an answer. They had all believed that humans were primitive, weak, ineffective. Everything they had believed had been wrong. Completely wrong. Mina moved to the window and looked out at the stars. When she spoke, her words were careful and thoughtful. "We witnessed humanity's response to a threat. Not their response to warfare, not their response to invasion, their response to a threat that could not be eliminated through negotiation or conventional defense." She turned back to face the council. "And it terrifies me because I understand it. I understand the logic. I understand the efficiency. And I understand that we may have just made the most dangerous first contact in the history of this galaxy." Outside the windows, the stars continued to shine. But something had changed. Something fundamental had shifted in the balance of power across the known universe. The humans had come to the Galactic Council as primitives, begging for scraps of territory. And in the span of 72 hours, they had proven themselves to be something far, far different from what anyone had imagined. The summoning notice arrived 3 days after the probe's return from the Kepler sector. Commander Hai-Il was instructed to appear before the Galactic Council for an interrogation. The formal hearing would take place in the Great Hall. Every council member would be present. Every question would be recorded for the archives of the galaxy. Hai-Il received the notice on his command ship. He did not react with anger or concern. He simply read the message, acknowledged it, and began preparations for the journey. His second-in-command, Dr. Jin A, stood beside him on the observation deck. She was younger than Hai-Il, but no less focused. Her dark eyes had the same quality of absolute clarity that seemed to define all of humanity's leaders. "Do you think they intend to punish us?" she asked. Hai-Il considered the question for a moment. "No. They intend to understand us. Understanding requires questions. Questions require interrogation. This is logical. They are afraid, and fear drives the need for understanding." "And if they decide we are a threat that requires elimination?" Jin'e pressed. "The Krell thought they were invincible too." A faint smile crossed Hai-Il's face. "Then they will learn the same lesson the Krell learned. But I do not believe they are foolish enough to teach themselves such an expensive lesson. They survived in space this long by being adaptable and cautious. They will choose caution." The journey to the council station took 2 days. During that time, Hai-Il and Jin Ai prepared for every possible question. They reviewed the details of the military campaign. They prepared explanations for their tactics. They anticipated the fears and concerns that would drive the interrogation. By the time their small transport ship docked with the station, they were ready for anything. The Great Hall was exactly as Hai-Il had imagined it would be. Enormous. Crystal walls revealing the infinite darkness of space. A circle of representatives from every major species in the galaxy. all watching with eyes that ranged from curious to hostile to fearful. Taijin stood at the center. His silver skin seemed to glow with an inner light, but his expression was grim. "Commander Hai-Il," Taijin began, his voice formal and cold, "you stand accused of committing genocide against the Krell Dominion. How do you answer this charge?" The accusation hung in the air like a weapon. Several council members leaned forward. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Jin'e's expression did not change, but she positioned herself slightly closer to Hai-Il, a gesture of solidarity. Hai-Il's response was measured and precise. "We committed no genocide. Genocide is the elimination of an entire people based on their identity. The Krell Dominion currently has a population of approximately 4 billion individuals. 98% of that population survives. We have caused them no harm." "You destroyed their military infrastructure," Taijin said, his voice rising slightly. "You eliminated their ability to wage war. You destroyed their weapons, their shipyards, their command centers. You have stripped them of everything that makes them the Krell Dominion." Hai-Il nodded slowly. "That is correct. We eliminated a threat. The threat was not the Krell people. The threat was the Krell military apparatus. These are not the same thing." Dr. Jin'e stepped forward, holding a data device. She activated it, and three-dimensional images filled the air above the council members' heads. Graphs, charts, historical records, thousands upon thousands of data points. "For the past 3,000 years," Jin'e began, her voice clear and clinical, "the Krell Dominion has engaged in military conquest of other species. We have analyzed every encounter. We have examined every battle. We have studied every treaty they have signed." She manipulated the data, showing patterns. "The Krell have violated treaties 92% of the time. They have launched surprise attacks against peaceful species with a frequency of one attack every 2.3 years. Their expansion has been constant and unchecked. We have modeled the most probable outcome of continued Krell aggression." Another image appeared. It showed civilizations marked in red, representing conquest or extinction. The red spread across the galaxy like a disease, consuming one civilization after another. The model predicted 17 additional conquests over the next 100 years. "If we had not acted," Jin'e said quietly, "the Krell would have eventually conquered or destroyed 17 additional civilizations. Billions of lives would have been lost. We chose to prevent this outcome." Mina raised a hand. "You could have warned us. You could have requested assistance. You could have negotiated with the Krell leadership for peace." Hai-Il's response was immediate and cold. Negotiation was impossible. The Krell do not understand compromise. They do not value peace. They do not recognize the validity of other cultures. We spent 8 months analyzing their language, their history, their psychology. Every pattern showed us the same truth. The Krell are incapable of changing their fundamental nature. They are engineered for conquest. They were created by their ancestors to be warriors. To ask the Krell to stop waging war is like asking a star to stop burning. A Valorian princess named Yun-Hee spoke up. "You had no right to make that decision. You are not the judges of other civilizations. You are not the executioners of the galaxy." Hai-Il looked directly at her. "You are correct. We had no right. But humanity decided that the right to survive supersedes the right to judge. The Krell invaded our territory. They threatened our people. They would have eventually consumed our civilization as they have consumed so many others. We were defending ourselves. By committing genocide," Taijin repeated. "By preventing genocide," Hai-Il corrected. "The Krell military was a weapon of genocide aimed at the peaceful species of this galaxy. We disarmed that weapon. That is not genocide. That is survival." The interrogation continued for hours. Every question was asked from different angles. Every answer was analyzed and challenged, but Hai-Il and Jin-Ai never wavered. They never became angry. They never became defensive. They simply explained over and over again the logic of their actions. When it was finally over, Taejin looked exhausted. The silver of his skin seemed dimmer somehow. "You will return to your people. The Council will convene to discuss the matter of humanity's status within the galactic community. You are excused." As Hai-Il and Jin-A turned to leave, Mina's voice stopped them. "One final question, Commander. Was there any possibility of negotiation with the Krell? Any chance at all?" Hai-Il turned back. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, something like sorrow crossed his face. "We spent 8 months examining every possible scenario. 3,000 simulations. In not a single one did peaceful negotiation result in a lasting peace. The Krell culture is built on conquest. To remove that is to remove everything they are. We could have given them ultimatums. We could have offered them terms. But in the end, they would have eventually returned to war. And the next time, we might have lost. We chose certainty over hope." He paused. "Perhaps we were wrong. Perhaps there was a way we did not see. But if so, it cost us nothing to be wrong. The galaxy still exists. Its people still live. And the Krell themselves are not extinct. We simply removed the mechanism of their aggression." With that, he left. And behind him, the Galactic Council was left to consider whether the humans were saviors or monsters, or perhaps something far more terrifying, something that was neither, simply logical. The news of the Krell's fate spread through the galaxy like lightning through a storm. Within days, every species had heard the story. Every civilization understood what had happened. And fear, pure and primal, gripped the heart of the galactic community. The reactions were immediate and dramatic. Small civilizations that bordered human space began requesting military protection. Entire species approached the Galactic Council demanding assurance that humanity would not target them next. Markets crashed. Alliances that had stood for centuries began to crack and fragment. A civilization that had just begun to achieve peace found itself teetering on the edge of chaos. Taejin called for an emergency session of the Council. This time, the tone was different. This was not a casual meeting about territory. This was a meeting born of fear and desperation. Almost every representative arrived with security teams. Several brought weapons into the Great Hall, something that had never been permitted before. "We must do something," a Valorian general named Min-Suk declared. His voice was loud and urgent. "The humans are a threat to galactic stability. They have shown themselves willing to commit acts of mass destruction without hesitation. If we do not act now, they will eventually conquer us all." A Skorak philosopher named Dahlia shook her head. "That is logical thinking based on fear, not on facts. The humans have not attacked any civilization except the Krell. They have not made threats against any nation. They have simply defended themselves. They defended themselves by eliminating an entire military apparatus," Min-Suk shot back. "What is to stop them from doing the same to us? What is to stop them from deciding that our existence is incompatible with their survival?" Taejin raised his hand for silence. "I propose we form a coalition to contain humanity. If we unite our forces, we can limit their expansion. We can prevent them from becoming too powerful. We can ensure that they never again act without the permission of the Council." The proposal was popular. Many representatives nodded in agreement. A Valorian princess named Hyojin leaned toward her advisors, speaking in whispers. A Skorak merchant named Q stood up to voice his support. Even some of the more peaceful species seemed willing to entertain the idea of containing the human threat. But Mina did not move. She sat in her seat, still and silent, watching the chaos unfold around her. Finally, When Taijun was about to call for a vote, she raised her hand. "I must object to this proposal," she said. Her ancient voice somehow cut through all the noise and fear. Everyone turned to listen. "The humans are not a threat to this galaxy," Mina continued. "They are a consequence. A consequence of our own weakness and our own failure to maintain order." Taijun's face flushed with anger. "You defend them?" "I examine the facts," Mina replied calmly. "In the 3 years since humanity joined the Galactic Council, how many times have they violated a treaty with any of us? 0. How many times have they demanded territory that belonged to someone else? 0. How many times have they threatened another civilization without cause? 0. She paused, letting her words sink in. The Krell invaded human space. The Krell were going to eventually invade all of our spaces. The humans eliminated a threat that we have all lived with for thousands of years, a threat that we were too weak or too afraid to eliminate ourselves. A blue-skinned merchant named Kaitai stood up. The human commander himself said there was no chance of negotiation. He said the Krell were incapable of change. How can we trust a species that has already decided our fates? Because they could have lied, Mina said simply. If they truly wanted to conquer us, they could have claimed the Krell threatened us. They could have invented justifications. Instead, they have been completely honest about their methods and their reasoning. That is not the behavior of a conquering species. That is the behavior of a logical one. The debate continued for hours. Taijun argued passionately for the Containment Coalition. He provided statistics about the dangers of allowing a single species to accumulate too much power. He warned about the possibility of humans deciding that other civilizations were threats that needed to be eliminated. He painted vivid pictures of human ships descending on peaceful worlds, removing problems as they had removed the Krell. But Mina countered each point with careful logic. She presented data showing that humans had repeatedly shown patience and restraint. She highlighted the fact that humanity had never once made a demand that was outside the bounds of fairness. She reminded the Council that humans had lost lives defending the peace, not starting wars to expand their power. "If we attack humanity," Mina said, "we prove that we are the threat they need to eliminate. We prove that High-Ill's logic was correct. If we show that peaceful species cannot be trusted, then the only logical response is to remove them before they can become dangerous. We would be creating the very threat we fear." The weight of that statement settled over the Council like a heavy blanket. Taijun began to understand what Mina was saying. If they attacked humanity, they would confirm in humanity's mind that civilizations like theirs were incapable of coexistence. They would justify every action the humans might take against them in the future. "Then what do you propose?" Taijun asked quietly. "We cannot simply ignore this situation." "We accept humanity as a permanent member of this council," Mina said. "We recognize their right to defend themselves, and we improve our own governance. If we become trustworthy, if we keep our promises, if we demonstrate that we are capable of peacefully coexisting, then there will be no logical reason for humanity to remove us as threats." Taijun looked around the room. The fear was still there, visible in the faces of the other representatives. But so was the beginning of understanding. A Valorian named Da Young spoke up. "The Councilor's logic is sound. If we attack humanity without cause, we condemn ourselves." One by one, other voices joined in agreement. Not everyone agreed. Taijun's Containment Coalition still had support from several species, but when the final vote was called, Mina's position won. Humanity would not be contained. Instead, the Galactic Council would take steps to improve its own governance and demonstrate its trustworthiness. But something had changed in that vote, something fundamental. The balance of power had shifted. It was not that humanity now ruled the galaxy. It was simply that everyone understood, with perfect clarity, that they did not need to rule the galaxy to control its fate. They merely had to be willing to do what others would not. As the session ended and representatives left the Great Hall, Tejan stood alone at the center. He looked out at the stars visible through the crystal windows. Somewhere out there in the vast darkness of space, humanity was watching and waiting. Not threatening, but present. Not conquering, but ready. And Tejan understood for the first time what it meant to share a galaxy with a species that could solve problems with permanent solutions. It meant living with perfect clarity about your own survival depending entirely on not becoming a problem worth solving. The great fear was not that humans would attack. The great fear was that they might be right. Weeks had passed since the Council had voted to accept humanity as equals within the galactic community. During that time, the galaxy had slowly begun to settle. The panic that had gripped so many civilizations had faded, replaced by a strange, new calm. A calm born not from comfort, but from understanding. The understanding was simple. In this galaxy, there now existed a species that would do what needed to be done, regardless of the moral cost. And knowing that someone was willing to pay that cost, most species found they no longer needed to. Trade disputes that might have led to war were suddenly resolved through negotiation. Territorial conflicts that had simmered for centuries were settled peacefully. Even the most aggressive species seemed to find themselves more willing to compromise. It was not that humanity threatened them directly. It was that everyone understood what humanity was capable of doing, and no one wanted to discover if they qualified as a problem. But not everyone had accepted this new reality with grace. Tejan remained deeply troubled. He had spent his entire life believing in the power of diplomacy, negotiation, and mutual understanding. Now he found himself living in a galaxy where simple logic and the willingness to implement permanent solutions had become the ultimate diplomatic tool. It was this troubling state of mind that led him to request a private meeting with Hael. The meeting took place not in the Great Hall, but in a smaller chamber overlooking the stars, just the two of them. No recording devices, no witnesses, just two leaders, trying to understand each other across the vast gulf of their very different worldviews. Hael arrived exactly on time. His dark eyes were observant, taking in every detail of the room. He sat across from Tejan, his posture perfect, his expression unreadable. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting," Tejan began. His voice had lost much of its earlier coldness. It was now careful, almost uncertain. "I have many questions." "I expected you would," Hael replied simply. "Ask what you wish to know." Tejan took a deep breath. "Will you erase us? If we become inconvenient, if we prove to be a threat to humanity, will you eliminate us as you eliminated the Krell?" The silence that followed was long and heavy. Hael did not look away. He simply considered the question with the same calm, logical clarity he brought to everything. "The Krell were a threat through their nature, not through their existence," Hael finally said. "Their entire culture was built on conquest. They could not exist without war. To ask them to change would be to ask them to cease being what they are. We examined every alternative to their elimination and found none viable." He paused, his eyes moving to the stars visible through the window. "But you, Counselor, and your species, and the other civilizations of this galaxy, you are different. You have the capacity for growth. You have the capacity for change. You have proven through your actions that you can learn from mistakes and alter your course. You are not inevitably destructive. You are merely sometimes foolish, and foolishness can be corrected." "But you could erase us," Tejan pressed. "You could do it as easily as you erased the Krell." "Yes," Hael acknowledged without hesitation. "We could. We could erase any civilization in this galaxy that became a genuine threat to our existence. But understanding this fact should bring you comfort, not fear. "How could such a thing possibly comfort me?" Taijun asked, his voice sharp. "Because it means you control your own fate," Hai-Il said. "You are not in the hands of blind chance or fate. Your survival is in your own hands. If you keep your promises, if you honor your treaties, if you show that you can be trusted, then there is no logical reason for humanity to remove you. Your species' future depends entirely on choices you make today and tomorrow and every day after." Taijun felt something like relief, but also something like dread. It was true. They did control their fate, but the weight of that responsibility was almost unbearable. "Was there truly no other way with the Krell?" Taijun asked quietly. "Could you not have tried harder to negotiate? Could you not have offered them some path to peace?" Hai-Il's expression shifted slightly. A flicker of something that might have been regret crossed his face. "We spent 8 months examining 3,000 different scenarios. In 3,000 simulations, every single path led to the same outcome. The Krell were incapable of sustained peace. It is not that we did not try. It is that the Krell were designed, through their evolutionary history and their culture, to be incapable of change." He turned back to face Taijun directly. "But I understand your question because I have asked myself the same thing many times. We were willing to do something that most species would find abhorrent, and there is always the possibility that we were wrong, that we missed something, that there was a solution we did not see." "And if you were wrong?" Taijun asked. "If there was a way to save the Krell and you simply did not find it? Then we will carry the weight of that failure for the rest of our existence as a species," Hai-Il said quietly. "We will remember the billions of lives that might have been saved if we had been wiser or kinder or more creative in our thinking. But we will also know that we made the best decision we could with the information available to us. And we will live with the knowledge that we chose survival over hope." The conversation continued for hours, moving between topics. Hai-Il answered question after question. Some answers satisfied Taijun. Others only deepened his discomfort. But through it all, one thing became clear. Hai-Il was not a monster. He was not a conqueror. He was simply someone who had been forced to make an impossible choice and had made it with perfect logical clarity. "One more question," Taijun said as the meeting began to wind toward its end. "Do you regret the Krell? Do you regret what you did?" Hai-Il was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than it had been before, almost human in its fragility. "Regret is an emotion, counselor. Humans feel regret. We also think logically. I cannot regret a necessary action. But I can understand the tragedy of it. I can comprehend the loss. And I can wish that the universe had been designed in a way that did not require such choices." He stood to leave. "But I cannot change what happened. I can only try to ensure that it does not happen again. The Krell are not extinct. Their civilization continues. Their culture continues. Only their military capacity has been removed. That is not genocide, but it is not without cost." As Hai-Il left the chamber, Taijun remained seated, staring out at the stars. In the vast darkness of space, he saw not conquerors or destroyers. He saw something far more complex and far more terrifying. A species that would do what needed to be done, and would do it perfectly, logically, and without hatred. They did not wage war because they did not need to. They simply removed problems. And in that moment, Taijun understood something that would change his understanding of the galaxy forever. The most dangerous species was not the one that loved war. It was the one that approached war as a problem to be solved rather than a conflict to be won, because a problem once solved stayed solved.